Welcome to the Strength and Recovery podcast, sponsored by the Recovery Centers of America Alumni Association. I'm at our beautiful Indianapolis location today, sitting down with Ben DeCamp, our alumni coordinator here. He's really doing an outstanding job, and I wanted you all to have the opportunity to meet Ben and hear his story. So welcome, Ben. We're glad to have you.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jaye.
Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, let's see. I'm 41 years old, born and raised in Indianapolis. And let's see. I've been in recovery for 15 months, and I got sober when I was 40 years old, and I first picked up drugs and alcohol when I was 13. So it was 27 years of when I picked up my 30-day token when I was 40 years old. That was my first 30-day token since I was 27 years. I never had 30 days from the time I picked up till then.
The first question is why 13 and why 40? I guess it's two questions, but which you can answer either one.
Yeah. So that's the question that we all ask ourselves when we get sober is why did I use, I think. For me, like getting into the fourth step, I started looking at some behaviors and some, memories. We
tell the listeners what's the fourth step.
Oh, okay. The fourth step's where we go through we do a moral inventory of our resentments and fears. And so it was just kind of interesting when I did my fourth step with the resentments part. I said I didn't have any real resentments, and because I was just so happy to be sober, and my sponsor really challenged me on that, and he brought up a story about being in third grade and being like embarrassed by a magician that came to his elementary school, and that opened up my way of thinking on that subject. And I started thinking about all these like embarrassing memories I have, like just memories that you have sitting at a red light, from your childhood. And I started thinking about all these scenarios where I just didn't fit in and where I just felt different or where I felt less than. And that's what started adding up on my resentment sheet. And around sixth grade, I was cut from the sixth grade basketball team, and that meant everything to me. That was like what I had all my identity tied up in.
We are Hoosiers for sure. Basketball means a lot.
And I was freakishly tall. I was taller than everybody, and I was really good at basketball for my age. But I got cut from the team because I think I put so much pressure on myself. I couldn't hit a layup. I couldn't. I just had a horrible tryout, and that affected me. That affected my sense of belonging and self-worth to the point I just kind of I started hanging out with a different group of people that I saw. They were like smoking cigarettes, and they looked differently, and they were behaving differently, and they were smoking pot and stuff. I came to find out later after I hung out with them, and I just dove in kind of head first because if I was with them, two things: I didn't have to try anymore. Like I didn't have to. I have this. I recognize my fourth step, the fear of failure, and the fear of, like I said, fear of not fitting in. And I think that's what started around sixth grade. Like literally within months of being cut from this basketball team, I'm hanging out with a new group of people, and I'm smoking pot, and I'm smoking pot every single day of the week. I mean, it's just. Can you take us to that
first encounter with a mind-altering substance?
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't have the same experiences a lot of people have with, like being so blown away by that encounter or by the reaction of the drugs. It was more even before. It was all about just fitting in with this new group of people, and like it was more about just feeling safe and belonging. And taking on this new and taking on a whole new identity. I did like the way pot made me feel, I believe, like the physical effects of actually smoking it, but I think I liked the sense of belonging more with this group of people.
With that new peer group.
Yeah, with that new peer group. I wanted to be cool. That's all it was. I wanted to I did not like feeling different. So anyway, back to the resentments. Most of my resentments started from from the time I left, I went to a private Christian school to a public school. That transition was tough, feeling different from going from one school to the other. All these things added up, and then I think I finally felt comfortable with myself in sixth grade with this new found thing. Just with the identity of, okay, now I'm smoking pot. I'm hanging out with these guys, and I'm fitting in. I don't have to try out for a basketball team. I don't have to succeed in school or do anything and risk failing. I can just literally do nothing and be accepted and have this, safety. So it really started with that, and then I did like the way it made me feel, but I think that was something that more had to like kind of grow on. I know the first time actually that it really hit me, I don't think I loved it that much, but I was going to keep doing it until I did, So
that's interesting.
So some people say like, oh, I had one sip of beer and I was off. Like,
yeah.
I think I had to kind of work.
This was a gradual.
Yeah, like I had to want to be into the drug thing.
Yeah.
So it's a little bit different.
So that's sixth grade.
Mm-hmm.
When did it start to affect your life?
Immediately. So that would have been, I believe, May of my sixth grade year, or maybe the spring, second semester of my sixth grade year is when I started. And I spent the following Thanksgiving in juvenile. I'd already been arrested, so 6 months or so later, I was smoking pot every day, and it was obvious to, a lot had changed from the way I dressed, the length of my hair, and my parents knew what I was up to, and they called the police on me. And
they did.
Yeah. So I got arrested pretty quickly with a small amount of pot, and
that had to be a tough call for them.
I'm sure it was, but they had to do something. I mean, it was.
Yeah. That was a brave choice.
It was pretty out of control pretty quickly. I mean, I went all in on the whole drug scene pretty quickly. And I never got off probation I don't think I got off probation for about 10 years.
And it escalated to other drugs.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Alcohol after that. And all these things, alcohol was even better after, I was on probation and I couldn't pass drug tests. So I started finding, I could take LSD or I can drink beer and that won't show up in the drug test. That's literally all it was. I was trying to find ways to still kind of hang out with. I remember like the drug test, when I realized that I could not pass some of these drug tests for pot, it wasn't, again, the feeling wasn't, oh no, I can't smoke pot again. It was like my whole, like, how am I going to have a social life when all we do is smoke weed, and that's our whole like identity. With alcohol, it was just another means to an end, but I felt so comfortable the first time I drank. That was kind of like a spiritual experience, for lack of better terms, I guess. Back then, I felt the belonging and I had the confidence. Like I could talk to women at parties. I didn't. All my insecurity went away. The fear of not fitting in, fear of rejection was completely gone.
Did it lessen anxiety?
Yeah, I had not. I had no, relaxed the inhibitions or whatever. I was not, because I've always been kind of self-conscious and like an insecure guy, I guess. And not when I drank, that was the big thing, honestly, fitting in and being able to talk to women. Like that just seemed like I found
that confidence level.
Yeah, like I found the secret to life with alcohol. And so that just kind of set off a new direction where I was not necessarily drinking every day, but I thought about it every day, and I drank probably 3 to 4 nights a week, depending, sometimes more. And that, again, that came with more consequences. I was constantly getting arrested for public intoxication or minor intoxication, different things, and violating probation. And that continued from high school through college, but not to the point where I ever thought there was a problem. Like I had enough. I had friends still. I had success in certain areas, and it wasn't clear to a lot of people that I had a problem, other than my religion teacher did actually take me to an AA meeting when I was 17 and like strongly recommended that I start going to AA meetings with him. And that's probably not normal for, like, there were signs that there
What was your first AA meeting like?
It was a bunch of old men in a smoky basement at church, like your typical, stereotypical AA meeting.
And did you connect with it at that point?
I was 17, and like the average age in that room was probably 65.
So you're like, this is not for me.
I didn't know what I was doing there. I didn't care. I had a lot of respect for my my religion teacher who was in AA. And like to back up a little bit, I'd been kicked out of my high school, and then the only place that would take me was the private Catholic school. So I was back in a private school there where it's a little bit more hands-on. It's, you kind of stick out if you're causing trouble there. And so...
So were you hiding it at this point, or were you
not
able
at all.
to...
Not at all, and I probably didn't look much different than anybody else because the other kids were doing it too. I was just getting arrested more. I was just louder and probably more obnoxious. I don't know. I didn't get away with I was also like 4 inches taller than everybody. I always got caught for everything.
You stick out in the crowd, Ben?
Yeah. But there must have been some signs. He didn't ask anyone else. I don't think he was taking other kids to AA meetings. He got involved with my family, and my uncle was an alcoholic, and he helped my aunt kind of navigate that. And he really, kind of took an interest in my family, and that was cool. But he couldn't have convinced me that I had a problem, and nobody else probably could have for a long time. Because like I said, I got through high school somehow. I even got into community college and got through IUPUI and graduated. So I had enough things going right that I never would have stopped and said, I'm an alcoholic or I'm a drug addict. The other big thing was I was taking tons of Adderall, which was prescribed to me. So you couldn't have told me that was a problem either because I was getting it from a doctor.
Okay.
So that was just the way of my 20s, constantly hungover from, the nights of drinking and trying to figure out how to get through work the next day. But I was always just looking for things outside of myself was the other big part of it to make me happy. I was always looking at it. When I drank, I'd be up till 5 a.m, just never wanting it to end, always looking for more. So it'd usually end in 5 a.m, doing cocaine in the bathroom with a bunch of people or something, and chasing women, whatever it was. But there's never I never would just go to bed at midnight. Like that was a good night. It was just I was always the last one standing, looking for more and more and more, and never really finding contentment. Like when I look back on it, I was never just happy to just I don't know, just. I could never just be content on my own. I always needed something more, vacations or more parties and material things, cars and clothes, just whatever. Nothing was ever, I could never be satisfied. And I kept plugging along like that. It was mainly, alcohol, Adderall, pot, various drugs, cocaine at times. Until I found painkillers, which that was just a means to help cure a hangover. But I noticed I really liked the way opiates made me feel. So I started dabbling with those a little bit, and that just I started noticing that I was content with just that. And I stopped. I wasn't drinking as much. Like I could take a few Oxycontin and I would be pretty happy. And within a few weeks of trying those painkillers, somebody brought heroin around, and I never thought in a million years I'd try that, but I did one day. I don't even know what made me make that leap, because it is kind of a leap to go from like painkillers to just jumping into heroin. But I noticed I liked the effects of it, and I thought if I liked what it was? It was actually the price of it, I think. Somebody said, this is basically the same thing, and it's much cheaper because the Oxycontin were expensive. But when I snorted heroin one night, and that kind of like the alcohol, I really thought that was like the secret to life. Like I'd figured something out. I was content. I didn't need to keep doing a bunch of it. I think I bought $20 worth, and it actually lasted a few days. And I just thought, well, if I can just manage this, like I know how to be happy. I don't have to, go after. I don't need cocaine. I don't need alcohol. I don't need pot. I don't need whatever it is. All these external things. I remember for the first time just thinking I was really content, and that's all I needed.
And just $20.
Yeah, and it was
for
just
every few
$20.
days.
Yeah,
But it didn't stay like that.
And I just needed to manage it. It also, I was at the time I just finished college, and I thought I was really funny at the time. I started up a comedy magazine, and I was my plan was to move to LA and to become a comedy writer at the time. And I'd actually started working for the Onion franchise in Indianapolis when they were here briefly. And so this drug was perfect. I could sit at my computer and just type and just be content to just sit there for like 10 hours and so I was like, oh, it's going to help my career. It's going to help my anxiety, my sleep.
The great delusion, right?
Like, it's just like, I thought it was like steroids for the brain. Like, it's just going to make me smarter and better and able to handle all these things that I used to struggle to handle.
How'd that work out?
It did not work out very well. But so real quickly, I went from doing it like I'd take like 4 days off so I wouldn't get physically addicted, and then pretty soon I'm doing it every single day. And I refused to be a drug addict. I always said I would tell the people that I would do it with, which is very few people, my dealers and whatever, that I had too much respect for myself to become a drug addict, that I was going to be disciplined with my heroin use. And so that's how it began. And I really quickly, within a few months, I realized that I was physically dependent on it, and that scared me. So I decided to move to Los Angeles. I was already actually planning to move to Los Angeles for this comedy writing thing. But then I decided that Los Angeles would be how I get sober. And I don't know, maybe we're talking maybe 8 months of use, but I'm physically addicted to it. And I didn't know how to quit. So I just took off for Los Angeles at one point and thought, I don't know any dealers there. I don't have any connections there. That's how I'm going to stay sober. Just put some distance between me and my drug of choice. Obviously, I get like halfway, I'm not even halfway there, and I start getting really sick. End up somehow getting to Los Angeles, and within, I don't know, I think I got there around midnight, and at 2 a.m, I didn't know anyone in town, like I said, but instead of like sitting there and like struggling through it and not picking up again, like a nerd, I got on my computer and typed in like how to find heroin in Los Angeles, and somehow that worked, and I found a 14-year-old kid who lived by the airport who was selling heroin out of his mom's house, and so I had a dealer within like 2 hours. So that was my first attempt at staying sober. That did not work. I know a lot of other people have tried to do the distance thing. My disease progressed in Los Angeles, and the problem there was it was, in Indianapolis, I was able to snort heroin, and out there it was black tar that you had to inject. So, which I actually had done in Indianapolis a few times, but was uncomfortable with it. And out there, that was the only option. I mean, that was the best option. And so it escalated.
Take me to that choice the first time you inject.
I couldn't even look. I had to have somebody else do it for me. And I would drive for like 20 minutes and have somebody else do it for me for a few weeks, and
because that was a line, I'm sure.
Oh, it's a big one. That was something I said I would never do. I mean, that's what I thought the junkies did, and I wasn't a junkie. I wasn't even a drug addict. I was just somebody that did heroin in a disciplined fashion that I could handle it. That was a major line, and that's when things got pretty bad in Los Angeles. I'm a white kid from the middle class suburbs of Indianapolis, and I'm in the worst neighborhoods of Los Angeles, hanging out with some of the worst people. I'm on Skid Row, and just places where I have no business being, trying to navigate the streets and figure out how to get drugs. Because I didn't have reliable dealers or people that really knew me. I was just buying off the streets and put myself in really bad situations. And it's an expensive city. The whole thing just came crashing. I could not afford to keep my drug habit with the 2 jobs I was working and living in Los Angeles. So I came back to Indianapolis, and that was probably around 2013. And I checked myself into Fairbanks. I checked myself into rehab, and I stayed for 7 days. My plan was to do the detox only thing, and I told everyone I was in Florida on vacation. And my parents, there's not one person I don't think that knew where I was. I didn't want anyone to know.
Now, did your parents know you had?
Nobody knew.
Nobody knew you even had an addiction issue at this point?
Yeah, nobody knew. We're probably 18 months in at this point or more, and nobody knew. People probably started to figure out there's something not quite right, but I was really big on appearances. I made sure I had clean clothes, and I took care of myself the best I could so nobody would look at me and say that guy's a junkie or that guy's a drug addict. So yeah, and I didn't hang out with anybody that used drugs or used those kinds of drugs. My friends were guys that maybe if they hard drinkers at best, or just normal casual drinkers, people that would drink on the weekends, maybe smoke pot and stuff like that, but there weren't hard drugs in my circles.
So this is your first rehab experience, right? And so you go in and you're, the options would be stay 30 days and you're like, no, I'm not, that's not for me. I'm going to just get this out of my system.
Yeah. 100%. That's
so 7 days for me, and I'll be better. Is that
7 days? And don't let anybody find out about it. Sweep it under the rug and go back. I didn't even make it 7 days. I still left against medical advice after 5. The withdrawal symptoms were horrible, and I couldn't stick it out or didn't want to, and I left and I got high within 20 minutes of leaving there. I mean, I left and went straight to the drug dealer's house, and then I just decided I was going to do this on my own.
In the facilities.
So my brother dabbled with some painkillers and some opiates, and he was kind of just a casual drinker before that. But he got arrested, and he was forced to stop using because of his arrest. But he did do. He went through treatment, and he did outpatient. He did all these things, and he kept telling me that I had to do the same thing because that people cannot do this on their own, which just sounded to me like some propaganda that he learned in treatment. And so I really took it personally that I'm the younger brother, but we were always competitive, and I wanted to prove to him and to anybody else that I can do it on my own, and I don't have to listen to you or anybody else, that I'm better than you. And I will do this on my own. And it really angered me when he said that a handful of times. So I would load up on Xanax, which would help with the withdrawal symptoms, and I would take those to get to sleep and to get rid of the cold chills and the sweats and all these horrible symptoms that come with opiate withdrawal. And I would detox myself from home all the time. And so I'd make it to day 5, 6, or 7. Even with those drugs, it would still be pretty rough, And I'd make it to day maybe 5, 6, or 7, and then I'd say, well, you really went through some stuff there. You should, you owe it to yourself to go get high today, and then tomorrow you'll go back to being sober. And that obviously didn't work out ever. It was a constant state of just detoxing myself. Eventually, I didn't realize what I was playing with.
You had to be exhausted.
I was exhausted, but persistent. I don't know. I wasn't getting.
Yeah.
I was exhausted, but I kept thinking I'd find my way out of it. And I tried this way so many times that the Xanax. I actually got addicted to Xanax. I didn't realize that was even a thing, that you could be addicted to Xanax. So my parents were out of town. This was like a few years after the Fairbanks experiment that failed. I was detoxing at my parents' house while they were in Michigan, and my brother happened to stop by, and he found me on the floor and called the EMTs. What had happened was my body started shutting down. I thought I was in just opiate withdrawal, which I'd been through a bunch.
And when you say opiate withdrawal, I don't know that people understand how desperate and how horrible experience that could be.
It's up there. I mean, nothing feels. Food doesn't taste good. No, you can have your favorite food in front of you, and you won't want to eat it. You have no appetite. There's no possible way to get joy or pleasure out of anything.
And pain.
And there's leg aches and stomach aches and nausea. It's just the worst. It's you want you feel like you're going to die, but you're not going to die. You might want to die, but you're not going. Like typically, it doesn't kill you. And
So he finds you in this state.
He finds me on the floor and calls, and I was just he started yelling at me, I guess, saying I need to go to rehab, and I just wasn't responding at all. I just had this big smile on my face, and the EMTs came and took me. I ended up in the ICU. They couldn't speak to me. They told my parents came back from their vacation, and they were told that I overdosed on hallucinogenics. And my brother's going, no, that's not what he does. Like he was still trying to be a good brother and not tell them that I'd messed around with opiates. So he wasn't giving them any information, which is kind of crazy. But so nobody really knew. He wanted me to be able to tell them, I guess, what happened. So I was in a coma basically for about 6 days. I don't know what I've never found out what they call this thing, if it's a coma or what. But after about 6 days, I just remember I came to, and my parents were in the ICU room, and I had no clue where I was. I told them that I believed that I worked for John F. Kennedy as his blimp manager because he travels by blimp. And that was his preferred mode of transportation, and he needs me to coordinate the two. I'm dead serious.
Sounds like an exciting job.
Yeah. And I had a whole rap about how Marilyn Monroe's in one blimp and Jackie O's in another blimp, and I need to make sure they don't. And so I had. I could go down that rabbit hole forever of all the things. It took me about 4 or 5 days for them to kind of deprogram me and say, you don't play for the Pacers, you don't work for John F. Kennedy, like all these things. You did not just compete in the British Open, all these things. I think whatever was on the TV in the hospital room, I absorbed and thought.
False memories.
Yeah.
Creating.
It was a really scary thing, and that was the first time when I came out of that I told my parents what had really been going on all these years. That I was addicted to heroin, and I was trying to stop.
And what was the reaction?
That was tough. So like my parents obviously cried, and they were really supportive. They were terrified, and I felt I just felt horrible that I put them through that. I mean, their vacation was ruined. They drove home because they thought I was dying in a hospital room. So I thought that had scared me to death to the point that I was going to stop. We checked it. We left Community North Hospital, and we enrolled in outpatient. And so I did that for about 2 weeks. I stayed sober for maybe 10 days off that scare. That's about all I could muster. And I remember those being really long 10 days too. Like it was really hard to even get that long. But the threat of death just wasn't enough. I did not know how to get sober. I went back out. Like I said, after 10 days, I stopped going to IOP. Tried probably a few months down the road. I went to another treatment center, tried a rapid detox thing where they put me on Vivitrol. And that actually kept me off heroin for 60 days, but the whole time I was on the Vivitrol shot, I was smoking pot and taking Xanax, and so nothing had changed there either. And one day I just got the idea that I needed to come off this Vivitrol shot. I don't know what my thinking was there, but I think deep down I knew I was going to use, because I used pretty quickly after that. Tried treatment a few more times, checked myself into Harbor Lights, which is a state-run rehab center where you can pay like $110 for a week of detox. So I didn't have to make a big thing about it with insurance or telling about, again, like no one would know when I would do these things. Very low key. not wanting anyone to know where I was. And around this time, I started overdosing a lot too. Around these times, I would, I think I wrecked, the past 10 years, I think I've wrecked about 8 or 9 cars, totaled 8 or 9 cars. And several of those times, I was Narcaned on the side of the road by EMTs, and I got a DUI for OWI for one of them. I just couldn't. I could not stay sober, and I could not stay alive. The only reason I'm still alive is just dumb luck. People found me, usually on the side of the road, sometimes at traffic lights. And that didn't bother me at all. That was just cost of doing business. I would leave I would leave the hospital and go. I would usually be upset that they Narcaned me and took my high away, and I'd go right back to the drug dealers, and I'd get high again that day or that evening. And so that was a constant thing where I was for the past 5 years before I got sober, it was basically either in a detox bed at my house or in some facility, or waking up in hospital beds after an overdose, and that just seemed like a normal part of life. And I just kept thinking one day
And you talk about the threat of death was. Did you think you weren't gonna die, or did you just not care if you did?
I didn't care. I did not care if I died anymore. Life had gotten so bad. I mean, I was depressed beyond belief. I mean, that's not any kind of a quality of life.
No.
My friends weren't coming around because they didn't know, but they knew something was very wrong. I look back at the pictures, and it's just like a dark, shadow over me. Yeah, in the eyes and everything. And I was very alone. I was isolated. I mean, that's the only way I could get away with using and not have people on my back, is just to get high alone.
So you were 13 to 40. Mm-hmm. And what happened at 40?
So like when I was 39, I had a few overdoses in a row in a short amount of time, and at this point I was also out of money, so I'm living with my parents in their basement, and just a constant burden on them. And I was trying, or I thought I was trying. I went to an AA meeting, and I ran into a friend who invited me to his house, where it's a sober living house where I actually live now, where they have a big men's meeting on Sundays. And I walked in there not knowing what to expect. It was really intimidating, and they just tore me up. And man, it was a rough day.
They tore you up. Tell me
So I walked in, it's just 30 guys, and they're 30 guys in a big garage in the middle of winter, and they're
in Indiana,
telling me what I needed to do to get sober, and I'm telling them that I don't really have a drug or alcohol problem, and that
you can't say.
I believe that I didn't. I believe that drugs. I'll get into that more, but I didn't believe I needed to listen to any of the things they were saying. They kept. Just to shut them up, I kind of said, okay, I understand. I agree with you, and I will leave. They said, don't leave here today without a sponsor. So the main guy, there was one guy in the room, and he said, he was talking to me about my use, and I said, I can't do this recovery thing. I can't just... I can't let people know about it. I can't let people know that I'm a heroin addict because I have to work in this city. I have friends in this city, and he said, me too. And I tell everybody. And he said, I'm a successful realtor, and I tell everybody my business. Like, nobody cares. They just it's never hurt my business once. And I couldn't imagine that. I remember being really shocked he said that, and just kind of staring at him like, wow, like you tell people you're a heroin addict? That's crazy to me. But when they said don't leave here without a sponsor that day, there must have been something I liked. I must have liked that confidence because I asked him to sponsor me, and that was the best decision I ever made. He started working with me right away. We got through steps 4. I was still taking, like I said, I never had 30 days. I was still taking Xanax and smoking weed. The drug that almost killed me, by the way, and put me in the ICU. I was still taking that, but I wasn't doing heroin, and to me that was trying. I'm doing the steps. I have a sponsor. I took a 60-day token with him at a meeting because I really thought that was sober. Because all that I was doing Adderall, I was smoking weed, and I was taking Xanax, but I took a 60-day clean token because that's, to me, if I wasn't doing heroin, I was sober. You know, that was it.
It was your good enough point at that time.
I mean, it's crazy to think of now, but that, to me, that was really doing something. And yeah, and in some ways it's not nothing. I had stopped doing heroin, but I was still doing. Anyway, that obviously didn't last. I got through a few months. I got to my birthday, or right before my birthday in January. I overdosed. Checked myself into the stress center. Ended up spending my 40th birthday at a behavioral crisis center, basically like a mental ward, like one of the worst places I've ever been. It was terrible. It was also my mother's birthday. It was like probably one of the lowest moments of my life. And I was suicidal. I called my sponsor and I was like, I don't know how, I couldn't kill myself, but I just want to die. I want to, I just want to end it. And I keep waking up from these overdoses. I didn't care, like I wouldn't have minded just overdosing and dying, but I kept surviving. It was actually frustrating. So anyway, I got out of that place. I spent 1 week there, like usual, and I went home and immediately got high again, overdosed again. So that was like 2 overdoses in like a 9-day period. Luckily, this time I had a sponsor, and man, it's hard to talk about.
Thanks, Ben.
I love my sponsor so much. Like he started calling my house every day, and this is my parents' house, and I'm in the basement of their house and I'd completely given up. I was just like, I'm never gonna get sober. This isn't meant for me. Like, I'm 40 years old. Like, things just, people don't change. Things don't change. It's just never gonna happen. I've tried. I got a sponsor. I did I did all the way up to step 4, and I still overdosed. Like, it's all BS. None of it works. And that was my mindset. And I blocked my sponsor's phone number, and
And he comes to the house.
Oh, he called my parents every day, and he went to a treatment center in Indianapolis, and he wanted me to go to the same one. He said, you need to go to this place that I went, and you need to stay 30 days, and that's it. Like, you've overdosed twice in a 10-day period. Like, there's nothing else to talk about. And I was like, yeah, I can't afford it. It's not going to happen. My parents aren't going to go for it. Like, I have a job, which was barely true. My dad had me on payroll, but I wasn't showing up for work. But he did. So he started calling my parents. Actually, that's the only way I could talk to him. He was calling my parents' phone, and because I had him blocked, and I was telling my parents not to answer his calls because he was trying to ruin my life. This is exactly what I was telling him. And he told my dad, like, hey, I know it's a lot of money, but he needs to go. We got to figure it out. Like, pay for it later, finance it, whatever. And my dad said, well, he doesn't have the $20,000 or whatever it is. And my dad's like, and my sponsor just kept saying, well, then buy him a casket because he's going to die. And so he called every day and kept asking my mom and dad if they bought me a casket yet. And they were getting,
that's tough.
And they were getting upset. Like,
sure.
I mean, emotionally.
They're between rock and a hard place, for sure.
And they didn't realize, like, we didn't know him all that well. And, like, now looking back on it, that's just, like, what Kyle does. Mm-hmm. He's a bull in a china shop. Like, he's not going to take no for an answer. So he's calling them every day with that. And he's really getting on my nerves. And I'm answering their phone and yelling, getting in shouting matches with this guy who I barely know at the time, really. Tell him to quit harassing my family and, sure. All these things. And it's just amazing that he put forth that effort. I sponsor guys right now. I'd like to think I'd do the same. If somebody pushes me away, I usually say, okay, call me when you're ready, would be my mindset. But this guy's, really intense with it. And I couldn't shake him. So a couple things happened. One of my dad's good friends, my parents didn't have a ton of money, and I had none, but my dad helped one of his best friends get sober 21 years ago. And that guy works for a very prominent businessman in town who donates a lot of money to this rehab center. They called in a favor and got a scholarship for me to go to this rehab center. And my dad's friend and who got me in there has the same sober birth date as me, which is March 25th March 25th is our sober birth date. So March 25th of 2020, I went in and I got a free trip to this place, and I still had no intentions of really getting sober. I didn't care. I just went to stop having somebody call my house and saying, "Buy your son a casket." That was really I was sick of being harassed and hassled. I didn't go there thinking I could get sober by any means. But it was like I got there and it was just kind of a relief to be in a safe place, I think. I slept for about 2 days. I know I hadn't slept much at all that whole winter because I was either detoxing or just stressing out and overdosing and trying to figure out how to get through this whole thing. So anyway, I slept for a few days, and I noticed that I was just so worn out and so sick of myself that I wasn't thinking a bunch and I wasn't fighting as much. And so things just started happening real slowly early on. Like those were like big victories to me, that I just wasn't running out the door.
Yeah.
You know, that was the big thing. I was staying put. And then like we talk about spiritual experiences in this program. It's a spiritual program. And to me, I define that as moments. Like for me, it doesn't have to be this big giant thing. It can just be a moment where you're super present. And you just know that you're in the right place in the universe, which is something like I talked about. I never felt that way. I never felt like I never felt contentment, real contentment. I always needed to be somewhere else. If I was talking to you at a party, I was looking through you to see what else is, you know what I mean? Just never present. And then there was about a week into rehab, we were driving. I was driving with one of the techs, who's now one of my best friends, to CVS to get a prescription filled. And I was having the same argument that I've had a million times about not being a drug addict. I'm not a drug addict. I don't need the 12 steps. I don't need sober living. I don't need all these things that people keep telling me to do because I'm not one of you guys. I'm not a drug addict. I have a problem with heroin, but I'm not a drug addict. I know it just sounds so crazy, but this is exactly what I'm trying to sell this guy. And I said, I just need, like, my whole rationale was, like, I've done coke and I didn't get addicted to coke. I didn't end up in rehab for alcohol. I just got addicted to heroin because heroin's super addictive. I was like, it's awesome. It's an awesome drug, and anyone that does it's going to get addicted to it. I'm not a drug addict. I said, if any normal person did heroin, they'd get addicted to it too. And he just looked at me and said, yeah, but normal people don't do heroin. And it's not like the most, it's not some big genius statement. It's just what I need.
It was just the moment.
Yeah, like it hit me like a lightning bolt. Like that sounds like a fact. Like normal people don't do heroin sounds like a true statement. And like 1,000 people have tried to tell me that in 1,000 different ways in my 10 years or more of being in and out of rehabs. And all these failed attempts to get sober. A lot of people told me that. But anyway, it stuck that day, and I just stopped fighting. I was like, man, that's when the acceptance piece started to come into my mind. Like, okay, maybe I am a drug addict, and maybe these people have something to tell them. Like maybe there's something to all these things.
How did it feel at that moment to accept that label?
It felt really good because I was able to, like...
You've resisted it for all this time, and then all of a sudden...
It was just, like, I don't know, I was able to see it. It made sense to me. I started looking at my behaviors. Like, I started seeing addictive patterns in my... Like, I remembered... I went home that night back to the rehab. I was just silent, for one, just really thinking, like, oh my gosh, like, maybe I am. Maybe I'm an addict. Maybe I belong here. Maybe all this stuff is meant for me. And I started like...
All these light bulbs are coming on.
Yeah. And I started thinking about like my eating patterns and how like I remembered when I discovered like the steak queso burrito at Qdoba. I ate that every day for like 7 months until I almost couldn't look at one anymore. Like I'd always like find something I liked and like go way overboard with it.
Yeah.
My relationships with women. I remember I told a story that night in front of a counselor there that I hadn't even remembered this story in a million years, but I was 15 years old facing a year in juvenile or boys school if I failed another drug test. And I found a joint in my closet, and I couldn't not smoke it because I had it. And like I remember telling that story, and the guy said, "And you don't think you're a drug addict before?" Because that was my rap, was that I wasn't a drug addict until I turned 30 and started messing with heroin. And he's like, "Yeah, maybe this started way sooner, like back in childhood." And so like we started getting into those conversations and how it's not normal for a 14-year-old to go to juvenile and then keep going back over a drug. Like all the things that I gave up just to smoke pot or to drink, or then obviously with heroin. So all those things kind of came together, and I was able to accept them, and I got really excited. I was like, okay, like, because there's a solution. Like there's
a solution.
Yeah. So I was like, all right, like I'm a drug addict. Like, what do we do? Like the steps. All right, great. Let's do the steps. Get a sponsor. I already got a sponsor, so I'm ahead of the game. Like sober living. Let's do sober living. Let's do IOP. And so all these things that I said no to for all these years were just like no brainer. I'll do all of it. I'll do it twice. I'll do volunteer work. I'll do whatever. And that was it. That was the big, I talk about surrender and acceptance. The surrender part came where I was just too exhausted to keep fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Too exhausted to fight going back to rehab. Too exhausted to fight off I couldn't even get through these arguments about am I an addict or not or whatever, and I finally just stopped trying to fight against the current, I guess, and with that, and just accept the reality of the situation. Became pretty clear. Like, you're doing heroin, you're overdosing, you can't stay alive, you can't hold down a job, you can't do it was clear to everyone else in the world but me, so I think a lot of us are the last ones to know sometimes. I don't know. But that was it. All those pieces came together. The humility, like I didn't care,
You didn't care who knew anymore.
Didn't care who knew at all. Like when I came out of rehab, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, it's okay. How do you talk, or what do you say looking back at that 13-year-old?
So that's the acceptance part that I love the most. That nothing happens in God's world by mistake, right? Mm-hmm. Every arrest, every failed attempt to get sober was insanely worth it. I wouldn't change a thing. I wouldn't tell that 13-year-old anything, because I'm the happiest.
Having grace for him.
Yeah.
And what he was experiencing.
Yeah, it happened the way it was supposed to happen. I just, when you look around, I see people that live and die their whole lives and never get what I have right now, which is like contentment, true happiness, a sense of belonging, like.
And can I say purpose? Like what you're doing here, and I walk through this facility, and the people there's been, and just the comments from our alumni that you're able to help. Mm. And that you're able to relate to on a different level.
Yeah.
Right? Because you've been where they are.
Mm-hmm. For a long time.
It's beautiful. It's
amazing. So and I try to remind people that here when they're going through like really hard times. Like there were times that I've had some horrible times. That's why I relate to them. So I mean, I'm still blown away that I get to walk in this building and leave. That I work here. That I have the keys to the building. I can come and go. Because I'm used to being a patient. I'm used to being somebody that can't figure this thing out.
And what do we say to the people, the doubters out there that are looking at people with substance abuse and, oh yeah, those rehabs, they go 3 or 4 times and they still have issues.
To get all these pieces, this thing is fragile. So like when, my friend calls it your get it card, when you finally get it, like I know what to do and I'm going to do it. I've got like, anybody can do it. You just like, it's the hardest thing ever to get the humility to ask for help. Mm. And the humility to realize you don't know all the answers. And
the humility to ask for help again. Mm-hmm. When, we know, we know more about addiction today than ever. We know it's a brain disease. We know it's relapsing. And to ask for help again until you have that moment.
Yeah, it's difficult. I feel for people that are in here struggling and they leave and they go, oh, it doesn't work. Because I've been there. I wish I could sell a pill that would just give them all those things, the acceptance and
that's what we started with. I wish there was a pill to take all the bad stuff away.
Yeah, but there's not. Like, you have to go through all. You have to hit your threshold of pain, I guess. There has to be a point where you're just broken down to the point. To me, I had enough success and it doesn't take much. I was never a millionaire. I was never some wildly success, but I had success with my magazine and with this like tiny bit of success in my very little comedy career, and with my little bit of success in the restaurant business. I thought I could figure my way out. I thought I knew some things.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need to do it your way. I will figure this out. I see that a lot. People come here, well, I'm an attorney or I'm a doctor. Great. That doesn't apply here. Like, you have to get humble. You have to give up some self-will and find a way to become teachable, because it's a real simple thing. I mean, all this stuff is really simple to do. It's just the hard part is, I guess, breaking yourself down to the point you're willing to the gift of desperation, they call it.
Yeah.
You have to be really desperate to ask another man that you don't know to help you save your life and help you take you through the steps, and then listen to him. Call a guy every day that you don't know, and when he tells you to
that harassed your family, right?
And he'll tell me things to this day that I don't want to do. That's how you stay sober, is to keep that humility.
Is he still your sponsor?
Oh God, he's my best friend, my sponsor.
Oh, I love that.
I talk to him every day.
Well, he's gonna have to come in, and we're gonna have to interview him.
Absolutely.
With you.
He'd do it. He would love to do it.
I want to hear his side of the story.
But he knows I love him more than. I love my family. I love my parents so much, but there's no one in this world has done more for me than my sponsor. I mean, it's not even close.
Oh.
You're in the room, I can't even talk about him without tearing up. I try not to let him know, because he's when he's not around, it's hard to talk about him without crying, because he's just so amazing. He's done so much for me. Hopefully everyone has that experience with their sponsor. I don't know. I mean, I just can't. I can't even put it into words.
They're people.
Yeah.
And they care. And I want to say, I thank you for being one of those people.
Oh.
And turning around and giving it right back.
I hope so.
And thank you for your story today.
Of course.
Appreciate you sharing and being with us, and for all the work that you do for our alumni.
Oh, thank you. I love it. This is the best job on the planet. I mean it.
It's okay, so I always end with favorite recovery quote.
I've got it. I have it right there. My sponsor said that in a meeting, and I wrote it down. The level of my serenity is directly proportional to the level of my acceptance. So, because that's the fight now. I don't, thank God, the promises have come true. The AA promises, so many of them have come true. The biggest one, like the obsession, has been lifted. I don't obsess about drugs and alcohol on a daily basis. That's not the daily fight for me. The daily fight is to hang on to my serenity and my peace of mind, and
acceptance.
Acceptance is the answer. That's how I do. That's the fight every day. Starting with a gratitude list every morning. If I can make a gratitude list and be almost like moved to tears from that, I know it's a good day. When I can't, I'm really worried. Like, my acceptance is off, my serenity is in the tank, and I'm struggling. So anyway, the level of my serenity is directly proportional to the level of my acceptance, and that's a tool you have to work on. That's a tool I have to work on a daily basis, is my acceptance. And luckily, I have role models. I have guys like my sponsor, my grand sponsor, who are like Yoda. I'm like, I want to be like that. So that's what you aspire to now. Like the guys that have 10, 15 years sober, and so there's always a goal. There's always, like in recovery, it never gets boring. There's always something to aspire to, and to, to chase, because we're addicts. We have to chase something. And so for me, I'm chasing Serenity on a daily basis.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today for the Strength and Recovery podcast. Real people, real experiences, real hope. This podcast is presented by the Alumni Association of Recovery Centers of America. If you're interested in learning more, visit rcaalumni.com. Here, you can fill out our web form to make sure you're receiving our daily recovery emails and are notified of special events. The Alumni Association of RCA exists to connect individuals to an active recovery community. It is our goal to work with alumni to help them succeed, belong, and ultimately serve others. We help our alumni succeed by hosting more than 120 recovery support meetings per month, with both virtual and in-person offerings of big book studies, speaker meetings, beginners meetings, Monday through Friday daily inspiration meetings, meetings for men and women, and faith-based meetings. Second, we create a welcoming community that provides a sense of belonging with a full calendar of events each month. Speaker series, barbecues, holiday celebrations, bowling, sporting events, theater shows, and much more. Thirdly, we provide an opportunity for our alumni to serve both the recovery community and in our local neighborhoods. We offer speaker commitments, chair commitments, mentoring opportunities in our facilities, volunteering at food banks, recovery, and overdose awareness events. We look forward to having you with us again soon. Recovery Centers of America provides inpatient and outpatient treatment and has locations in Massachusetts, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Indiana, and Illinois. Recovery Centers of America, or RCA, was founded to break down barriers to expert treatment. We answer the phone and admit patients 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, are in network with major insurance providers, and provide evidence-based treatment in our world-class facilities. If you or someone you know needs help, call 1-800-RECOVERY and know we are here for you.